Right on. You got a great website,
Oh,
conspiracyjournal.com.
yes, indeed. Yeah.
Now, how long has that been up? Because, I mean, there's just a plethora of intel on here.
Well, that's Tim Schwartz, who is my co-host on Exploring the Bizarre and author of quite a few of our books. We have about 250 books, I think.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and uh, he does the website because I have to admit that when it comes to technology, it took me years even to get Skype running. I mean, I would fight and kick, and then when I did it, it took me 5 minutes,
Right.
as opposed to a lot of other things that will screw up your computer. And I still have I do a show every week, and I try to get the guest on Skype because the quality is so much better when it works. Now it does screw up. That's why I always like to have a couple of guests on and a co-host because you never know when it's going to go south on you.
Right.
But when it does work, the quality is certainly better than a landline. Coast to coast won't let the guests use Skype.
What does Coast to Coast use?
Telephone.
Wow.
Yeah,
Huh. I had no idea.
yeah, a land line. They won't let you use a cell phone, but they want you to use a land. But yet they'll take calls on Skype, which doesn't make any difference. Maybe they don't want you to sound better than George Norrie.
That's probably it. Yeah. Clear Channel's evil plan.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
That's
no,
funny, man.
yeah.
And I'm
Well,
on your YouTube channel right now, Mr. UFO's Secret Files. You got a great
yeah.
channel also. And you put together a new book. It's on Amazon now, finally. And Nazi UFO time travelers. Love to hear about that because I've heard the connections before, the Thule Society,
Yeah.
Roddenberry, all that stuff. Is
Well,
there any connections
even
there?
though even though I'm semi-retired, we still do about 3 books a month.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. In fact, we just came out with. No, I don't write these all myself, but I put my name up on Amazon because that way, if I'm on a show, I can tell people just the type of my name.
Sure.
But we did UFO Prophecy, which is a book that I had published. Oh, I don't even mid 1970s by Arthur Shuttlewood from Warminster, England, and so this is the 50th anniversary of the town that was haunted by flying saucers. So I got his granddaughter to do a new introduction and collected some new photographs from the town and reprinted all the old the material from the original book, which sold very well when it first came out. I mean, the books don't sell anything like they used to in the old days. It's
Because of the
sad
internet?
thing. Yeah, that has a lot to do with it. I mean,
Just
we give
mindset.
we give everybody all this stuff for free, right? I
Sure.
mean, they're
It's easy
sitting
to.
here and listening to our show and reading the material on there, and I don't know, who knows? People's habits change.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely. Our attention spans have definitely shortened throughout the
Yes,
years.
absolutely. That is one of the main thing. Well, we always did believe in a lot of visuals because my background is mainly publishing magazines. I was the editor or publisher of about 30 different titles, some of which never lasted more than one issue. But UFO Universe went for 11 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And, I'd like to really get to know your background first. I don't know if all of our
Yeah.
listeners here at Leak Project know really how you've been in a paranormal life your whole life.
Yeah.
It's been around you. And so could we get to know you personally a little bit and how you started off as far as, didn't you grow up in a haunted house also?
Yeah. I had quite a number of poltergeist. I guess I don't know if you would call them yeah, poltergeist phenomena. I guess low level poltergeist phenomena. Doors opening and closing and lights going on and off. And I remember one time we were at the kitchen table, and this big chinaware plate, slid off the table and went onto the floor. That would have been what, about 3.5 feet or something. And it didn't break or anything. I mean, I can't say it floated there, and I don't even remember. But I guess my big introduction to all of this was when I had my first of 3 UFO sightings. That would have been in 1957, which was a peak UFO a year. The big one, of course, was the first flap was 1947. Then you had a lot of sightings in 1952, which was the sightings around the Capitol building and things along that line. I mean, pilots were reporting stuff, and police officers were chasing unknown aircraft, and humanoid creatures were just seen popping up, where they had never been seen before, mainly in Mexico and South American countries. But little by little, the reports of encounters with, well, I call them ultra-terrestrials. I don't call them extraterrestrials because I have no proof that they come from, outer space. We really don't know where they can come from. I mean, everybody has a theory, and certainly, mine has changed a number of times over the years. I give it all more of a paranormal ring these days. But anyway, getting back to 1957, I was 10 years old at the time, and it was the middle of a heat wave in the summer, like July or August. And in those days, nobody had air conditioning, so you'd sit out on the front stoop, until it cooled off, and then you went indoors. And it must have been just after, right around twilight, someone had come running up to the stoop where we were sitting. I think it was my mother and a couple of kids from the neighborhood, and pointed to the sky. Okay, now there were two objects up there, or two lights, I should say. One was across the street, directly over an abandoned factory. It was a Lefkowitz Leather or something like that, and the other one was pretty much over the house where I lived with my parents. Not directly, but overhead pretty much. And these things continued to circle overhead for a period of about maybe, I would say 10 or 15 minutes. Now, I can't tell you Sony landing gear. No Martians waved at me that time. No portholes, nothing of that sort. But they did seem to be under intelligent control. In fact, the next day in the newspaper, there was a little item to the effect that other people had witnessed this phenomena, but the authorities were saying that it was nothing more unconventional than a weather balloon. Well, even at the age of 10, I knew that this was not a weather balloon. First of all, it was brightly lit weather balloons, especially after sunset, are not brightly lit. They do not have any illumination of their own. Not normally, anyway. This is long before, kites with candles inside and all that stuff. And now it's a lot easier, I think, to misinterpret a UFO than it was in those days because we had less stuff flying around. There was no drones. Nobody had balloons in the neighborhood. And so this was something unexplained, and I wanted to find out more. So I went and I bought a couple of paperback books. The books are by Frank Edwards, Charles Fort. Edward Ruppelt did the report on unidentified flying objects. He worked for the government for Project Blue Book. And I became engrossed by the subject. And I started writing into the local newspaper, asking people to report to me anything that they might have seen that they couldn't explain in the sky. And I started to get phone calls, and I started to get letters. And I started putting out a newsletter when I was about 15 years old. I had saved up. Now listen to this one. In those days, if you were like going to school, you could put 50 cents a week into a bank account. Students, can you believe that?
Yeah, yeah.
Today they'd call the cops and have you arrested or something.
Right.
Like that, But anyway, I amassed a fortune over a couple of years of a big $400. And I went out and I bought a mimeograph machine. It was, everybody else had bought the Sears and Roebuck version for $99. Mine was about $400. It was a Gestetner. And you typed the stencils and you put the ink on the roller, and it was a mess, to be honest with you. In fact, my mother banned me from using it in the house. It looked like something out of a crime scene. The kitchen, it had ink stains and fingerprints all over the wall of the refrigerator. You just couldn't get the stuff out. Anyway, I started out. It was called the Interplanetary News Service Report, and the first issue we printed was 75 copies and 10 pages. Now, in those days, you had no way to collate the stuff. I put out a big ironing board and put the piles of paper and go from one sheet to the other, then staple it at the end. And by the time I gave up the ghost and merged with Jim Mosley's Saucer News, we were up to 1,500 subscribers. We had as many subscribers as APRO had members, and but it was a lot of work, and it was 40 pages and had to print it and collate it all. So Jim Mosley, who had Saucer News, he took over the publishing of it, combined it with his semi-professional publication, and hired me as managing editor. And so I started traveling from New Jersey to New York every day. He had an office there. I got paid a salary, and I don't know. I just got into the publishing business, publishing, packaging other magazines for other publishers. they needed somebody to do it real cheap. I mean, where most magazines would have a budget of many thousands of dollars, we'd get $2,500, and we had to put the whole thing together for that amount, and whatever we had left was our profit. So I did magazines like Front Page Disasters, which was very interesting, and I always stuck in some sort of paranormal or like planes disappear in the Bermuda Triangle. Had nothing to do with hurricanes or earthquakes and stuff like that. But I always snuck in an offbeat article and stuff. So that's how I just got in. That I continued to put out my own little magazines and things too. I had for many years the UFO Review, which was the only flying saucer newspaper published every month in America, and it had quite a bit of a circulation. We printed something like 32,000 copies, and it was on newsstands. You could grab up a copy and for $1. And people used to complain that our publications were overpriced at $1. Can you imagine that? I pay for some of the glossy magazines that come in from England now, like $11.95.
Yeah, that's
big
common
big
now.
difference. Yeah, big difference. Yeah, and in fact, we did just come out with a UFO review special. It's on alien mind control, and it's available on Amazon and on Kindle, and you can buy it directly from us if you want. And it's the only publication, it's a quarterly, published in America in the English language, actually available in print. There are no more UFO magazines. In fact, the only magazine that I know in the entire world outside of this UFO review, which is more of a special than an ongoing issue, would be a magazine published in Australia called The Ufologist. I'm not including Fate magazine of 14 times because that's paranormal. But as far as I know, the only UFO magazine in print is The Ufologist out of Australia. So
Okay.
that's the state of the art publishing today. Not necessarily the state of UFOs, but it's the state of publishing, I'm afraid.
Huh. Well, and it sounds to me like you've definitely seen and done some amazing things. And have you ever personally been abducted or like made contact?
Oh, not that I have any recollection of, to be honest with you. Now, I did have an incident. Now, let me see. Going back to when I was about 4 years old, my life was saved by some angelic or spiritual force. Now, I'm not even a religious person. If you ask me, do I believe in God, I could sit here all day and debate you on that. I consider myself a seeker of the truth. I'm not an agnostic, but I lean towards that. If there is a God, I don't know how much control he has over the situation or whether he wants. I mean, we could debate that all the time. But anyway, when I was 4 years old, we were driving down to Kentucky. That's where my dad was from, and he had his brother down there. And in those days, my mother had asthma very bad. And believe it or not, that was one of the places where you could go and get relief from hay fever and stuff like that. Wrong, you can't do it anymore because everybody has bought their plants in for the rest of the. It's like Arizona. I went out there and I had a terrible a case of sneezing, and I said to the person, I said, I thought this was the desert. There was no such thing here. And they said, nah, man, everybody bought their plants from back east. Anyway, so we were driving there, and it was about a 4-day drive, and my dad did most of the driving while my mother tried to steer the steering wheel from the front seat.
Nice.
A front seat driver.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. But anyway, as I understand it, it was getting late one evening, but they were pretty close to their destination, which was Shelbyville, which was the town where Colonel Sanders started his chicken business. And
that chicken used to be good too. Now, I'm digressing.
Listen, I got a story. I knew Colonel. I met him once because I did an article for the Inquirer.
Oh, how cool is that?
He told me he wouldn't even eat his own chicken. But that's another story. He was having some sort of dispute with the company because they had bought his name and was paying him for the use of his image. And I guess one of the things was he wasn't supposed to go out and start another restaurant. Well, he went out and he started the Colonel's Lady or something like that, and that really peeved the corporation off, and so they had a big chicken war going on for a while. But I used to be a stringer for the Inquirer and all before they only had 3 celebrities that they chase around or something, and that's how I got to do interviews and ask all these celebrities like Bill Shatner and all about their UFO experiences. Anyway, to get I got off the track here. So we're driving to Kentucky, and it's getting late at night, and my father wants to continue driving because maybe we're an hour or an hour and a half away from our destination. And my mother, it's getting, I understand it's getting foggy and it's getting dark, and there are no street lights up in those, in those roads. Okay, so she insisted that he stop immediately, and he stopped immediately. And I guess we all took a nap in the car. And when the sun came up in the morning, we were on the ledge of a cliff. And if my father had driven another foot or two, I would not be around here to tell you all my UFO and paranormal experiences. So I guess the hand of fate has played. Well, I believe it kind of like the trickster element here. There's some force behind all of this, and it's an intelligent force, and it tries to communicate with us, but it also likes to have fun along the way, or at least our concept of what fun might be. Maybe it's not their concept, but one of the things that I believe is that synchronicity. These coincidences. I have had so many of those in my life that are not coincidences. I mean, they just go beyond on the pale. They borderline on the totally outrageous and the spooky. I do believe that they are trying to communicate with us, and this is one of the means that they have of speaking, and I use the term speaking in quotes. There is some intelligence, and it all can be grouped together, whether you want to call it UFO beings or ultra-terrestrials or aliens or spiritual phenomena or God. There's something going on all around us, and everybody has a different way of perceiving it. So therefore, I do not attack or infringe my own beliefs onto others. You are welcome to believe what you would like to believe, as long as I am allowed to believe what I would like to believe, which perhaps is a little bit odder and crazier than the standard definition.
I often wonder, I would think that all of the above could be true. Definitely think there's life on other planets, as well as this paranormal aspect. Oftentimes people think that when they see an extraterrestrial or a being that they can't explain, so they put that label on that specific entity.
Yes, absolutely.
There's all sorts of different possibilities. I certainly do believe in life in space and on other planets, yet I certainly think that a lot of times there's these, I guess you could call them just entities from different dimensions even. We only see 0.01% of the electromagnetic light spectrum, and then our brains filter out 50% of that. So there's a lot out there that we're not picking up on.
Oh, absolutely. I have never, okay, I knew quite a bit of the, people ask me, well, what is my opinion about UFOs? And in a nutshell, it doesn't pretty much matter what my opinion is. UFOs act independently of my opinion and everybody else's. They do what they want to do, and they do it on their own time schedule. And sometimes it seems to have a purpose and a meaning, and at other times it is just the craziest thing that you can ever imagine. And that to me is what makes these subjects so fascinating. If we were dealing with just lights in the sky, who would care? In fact, to me, the reports of lights in the sky are like very low-level evidential phenomena. I mean, you can see, you look at a lot of these videos on YouTube, and people take them with their cell phone, which is, of course, you're never going to get a fairly decent photograph with a cell phone. I'm sorry. Unless it's broad daylight and this thing is 2 feet in front of you, in which case people will say that you did it in Photoshop, it's going to be, dots and lights in the sky, with a very few exceptions. I've seen some videos that were taken over South America, like Chile, Venezuela at nighttime, that look like they're formations and they're changing positions and blinking on and off and doing things that normal aircraft wouldn't do, and they don't seem to be fake. I don't know how many people actually go out of their way to fake these things. Over the years, people have thought that UFO photographs was a great way of proving the existence of these craft, but they're not. I mean, being a photographer myself, semi-professional, I've grown to come to the point where I can almost tell you what any UFO is. There's one picture that everybody thinks is legitimate, and at first glance, it does appear to be legitimate. It was taken by a pilot in Costa Rica, and apparently from his cockpit window, he took a picture. Now, I don't believe that he saw the object when he took the photograph, but he was taking pictures of the scenery, Costa Rica being a very beautiful country, of course. I having filmed one of my horror movies, Skin Eating the Jungle Vampires over there. And anyway, he took this photograph, a series of photographs, and when they were developed, you see an object below the plane, almost directly below, but not exactly directly below, and it looks like a disc. Well, I looked at this for an hour or so, and I said to me, "This looks mighty suspicious." I went and I typed in helicopter aerial view, and what the photograph is, it's called blade whirl. When you have an object like a helicopter blade and it's moving, take a photograph or a video of the fan in the ceiling, and it gives a very, very strange effect. It changes appearance and it looks like a solid object, and so that's what this is. If you look at it, within a minute, you'll recognize it as the whirling of a blade from a helicopter. That's all. And everybody thinks this is one of the greatest UFO photographs ever taken. And it's a great picture, but it's not of a craft from another planet. It's of a helicopter blade. And a lot of things like this can. There's another photograph that's very popular. It even made, I think, the cover of Look magazine or Life magazine. It shows what purports to be a craft, and it has 3 or 4 colors into it, and it looks like it's got a little bit of a tail coming out of the back. It was taken by a 14-year-old boy near Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma. I believe the year would be around 1966 or 1967. And for years, everybody thought it was a legitimate photograph. Then I happened to be going through a copy of Playboy magazine, obviously for the articles. And there is a series of paintings done by a French artist from the 1920s and 1930s. And all of his stuff is kind of like Renaissance and sort of spooky and eerie looking. And there is a castle with a moat around it and some weird looking knights and the Pope with a red mask on, and up in the sky is this darn object. It is the object. If you look at the object and you put it up next to the photograph taken by this 14-year-old boy, you will realize it is the same. You cannot misidentify it. Stroke for stroke, it is the first thing. Now, the same thing. Now, the only thing that I have come to the conclusion, I don't think he went out of the way to hoax this. In fact, I think he told the story. He was taking photographs and he saw this object in the sky, and when he got the film back, there was nothing on it. Like 4 or 5 frames of him taking the nighttime photograph of something in the sky were blank. So he took it back, the roll of film back to the processing plant, probably a local drugstore or something, and said that he could see a speck or something on 1 or 2 of the negatives, and he had him blow it up. And there's this object. Well, I think possibly he went into maybe an art museum or an art gallery and took some photographs without a flash, because you're not allowed to use a flash in an art gallery, right? Took some photographs maybe of this fellow's paintings on the wall. And so just by luck, he got a little smattering of something from the painting. But this is supposed to be one of the greatest UFO photographs of all time, and it isn't. In fact, you can look it up on the internet. I believe it's called, the artwork is called The Red Mask. And you can compare it to this photograph that was taken in Oklahoma around 1967. You'll see it's the same thing. So the eyes and the mind do play tricks on you when it comes to UFOs. No doubt about it.
Well, anything can. And I know the big craze right now, this seems to be a 4-year cyclical deal. Every 4 years, I notice the internet gets this real big buzz about Planet X and the return of Nebel.
Oh, come on. Yeah, how is that possible?
Well, and, hey, I don't know. And I've seen a few photos that make me go, wow. But out of maybe 10,000 photos that I've seen, there's only 3 or 4 that would make me really do that. So I don't know. I've seen this cyclical thing, and I can appreciate people's opinions.
If it were here, it would have passed by. It would have been, I give no credence whatsoever to Planet X.
Have you seen any of the recent images that have been?
Well, I've seen images of things moving through space, but space is cluttered with all kinds of junk, man-made and chunks of rock and meteorite and planets and everything floating by. Now, there is an interesting book which we published years ago, and I never reprinted it because actually it wasn't a very popular book, and it was quite thick. It was by Captain Alvin Moore, I believe his name was, and he wrote a book. I believe it was called Sky. So I think it was Sky in the title. We changed it to UFO CIA operative or something similar to that because he was in the CIA or in the intelligence community, and he did a lot of research on the Charles Fort. You know, Charles Fort had all these stories about frogs and meat and fish and weird stuff falling from the sky. And Alvin Moore believed that there were invisible islands in the sky, and that there was one of these planets that actually passed by Earth, but for some reason, due to the reflection of light or different vibrations or however you want to describe it, it was not visible to the human eye. But we could see evidence of it through this different phenomena of strange falls from the sky. That one I actually give a little bit of credibility to. But you know what amazes me is people talk about Nibiru and Planet X. Why didn't they talk about this before Zecharia Sitchin? Everybody is an expert on the subject now, but Zecharia Sitchin, if it was legitimate, is the only one who really did the research because he supposedly was able to read the ancient tablets. These people can't read the ancient tablets. I mean, frankly, they're making this stuff up as they go along. I mean, that's my opinion. I mean, Planet X, Nibiru, very low down on the ufological totem pole, I would say.
Okay. And, you know, it's interesting because I interviewed somebody by the name of Mauro Bellino, which actually was a translator for the Vatican, and he took the Old Testament and he translated it with the Hebrew text. And what he did to translate it, I guess, was a little bit different than some people would do, is he would use the direct translation and take out the vowels. And what he came up with was literally ancient astronauts made us, not made us, but they manipulated our bodies. And I thought to myself, wow, this sounds very similar to what Zecharia Sitchin wrote about.
But there's a fellow who at least could, understand the literature from the time. Now, these people who write on this subject today, where are they getting the information from? Some of them are channeling it. Some of it are just adding to what Zecharia Sitchin has said. Some of them are just making it up as they they go along. You know,
a cornucopia of stuff. You're right. You have to know what to discern, and the internet can create that.
Yeah.
Well, and I certainly think that there's good information out there, and I'm like you in many regards towards being agnostic about things because I oftentimes, once I do think I've got the answer, then I realize, hey, I don't.
So how many, I must admit, I know nothing about your background. How long have you been doing the show, and why are you doing it?
Well, hey, great question. I've been doing research into the unknown now for over 20 years. As far as the show, specifically Leak Project, has been going on for a little over a year now. And before that, I would spend hours a day just researching the unknown, whether it was books or internet or white papers or documents or news or whatever. So that's kind of my background.
Leak Project. Are you leaking out the information? Is that the idea?
Leak Project is essentially a combination of news, entertainment, information from both sides of the coin. So, for example, I'll have guests on that will say absolutely they believe 100% that Planet X is real, and I'll also have guests on that'll say the exact opposite. They think it's a total hoax.
Well, that's kind of like my approach to this too. On our show, exploring the bizarre. Although, unlike some of these, I never attack. I have my way of getting my questions in there. And all without attacking the guest that's on. And if I think somebody is full of it, I just won't invite them on the show. And there are a few people like to me, Billy Meyer, and I'm not. I know I'll get a dozen emails on this. Is a total fraud.
Is he the talk show guy?
Billy Meyer, this guy in Switzerland who takes all these photographs.
Oh, I'm not familiar. I was thinking of the guy.
No. He takes these things and they look like physical, craft, and they're in the sky. And he's a one-armed contactee, and he's been taking these photographs and claiming to have contact with people from the Pleiades. Oh, I don't know, for 25, 30 years or something like that. And he's a very controversial figure. And some people they love the photographs. They look pretty good. But when you start to investigate him and do, like a research on his background, He takes photographs off the TV screen and claims that they're people from other planets. I mean, just all kinds of nonsense, and still people try to come up with like a reason to believe in what he's doing. Yeah.
And there's definitely, that's one thing too. When you can get out to everybody on a certain specific medium, then you can find your audience a lot easier, and more people that have certain like-minded ideals can kind of collaborate and stuff. So, really the Leak Project was designed for getting information, because that's what we want to do. We want to get to the truth. We want it to be entertaining, because if it's not, then nobody's going to want to watch it. But at the same time, the truth is what is most important. If we can handle the truth, we can handle it, and we've been lied to with the media for so many years. And that's one thing that I'm good at doing is picking out the lies that the mainstream media likes to portray. So
well, they don't. I mean, today, the mainstream media. Now, here's something that I heard the other day. This blew my mind, and I was watching CNN News, right? It's about noon, maybe a little bit before, and I couldn't even tell you who the host is. But it's all politics. It's all Donald Trump. It's all Hillary Clinton, and everybody is is working for somebody's campaign, and everybody is an expert on the other person's candidate. Okay, so there's a young black gentleman on from South Carolina. And I couldn't tell you what his name was, but they're interviewing him. He's a supporter of Hillary Clinton, and I'm sitting there eating lunch with my associate Carol, who's addressing some envelopes in back of me, and they start the interview, and this fellow says, for no rhyme or reason, "I don't know where the UFOs have gone." It's like somebody took over his voice box. And then he went on to talk about how Hillary Clinton was such a great a candidate, and of course Donald Trump isn't all that he pretends to be, and so forth and so on. But he made no reference whatsoever as to why he said that. And in fact, Carol says to me, she said, "Did he just say what I think he said?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, he doesn't know where all the UFOs have gone." Now, maybe he was reading something about Hillary, who's supposed to going to. Release information or try to. She ain't going to. You think the intelligent community, if they know anything, they're certainly not telling Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton today about UFOs. I mean,
right.
it isn't on. It's not on their agenda. And if they asked, they'd say, they'd even tell them there's probably nothing to it, or there's no reason for you to know, or something to that effect. Because the leaders are really not the leaders to that big of an extent, as we all really know. But this guy, I mean, that's the only reference I've heard of UFOs in the news for quite a while now. The guy just says, "I don't know where all the UFOs have gone," and then he went on to talk about politics.
I've seen some strange stuff.
That was a mind-controlled, some ultra-terrestrial got a hold of his tongue for 5 words.
You have been assimilated.
Do you remember a couple years ago when there was actually 3 or 4 times, this was I think actually 4 or 5 years ago, and there was 3 I think different accounts that happened within a couple weeks time, where there was one time specifically, I remember this gal that was up talking about the news, and I can't remember what program she was on, but it was a mainstream news outlet, and she's talking outside, and all of a sudden she's like, "Blip, blip, oh yeah, I'm back to you, Bob." It was crazy. And then it happened again with somebody else, and then people were like, "Man, what are they doing?" And then there was an article that came out about how, I think it was Caltech or some specific college, or DARPA, maybe it was DARPA, was working on some type of mind control tech that could actually, like this gun that you could point towards somebody, and their cerebral cortex or a specific part of their brain would deactivate, and they'd basically be like donkeys for a minute and just lose control. I was wondering, maybe they were beta testing something there. Do you remember that?
Well, I vaguely heard of that one, but Ian Pundit, who was like co-host on Sunday night of Coast to Coast, he's the he's a minister, and he, he's a pretty good a host, but he wasn't on that often. Anyway, he was on one night, and they replayed this on the air a couple of times. And at first, it was embarrassing to him, and he had no explanation for it. But in the middle of a sentence, he just went like orgasmically crazy or something, and started spewing out this stuff for maybe 20 seconds or so, which made absolutely no sense.
I mean,
I'm sure. I'm sure I've done that, but that's I'm not the host of Coast to Coast. Yeah, and he had no explanation for it, and nobody seemed to really have Why not? I guess once in a while something does come. It can take over your I was going to say brain or your mechanism or motor functions or something.
Sure. There's a lot of possibilities out there. And, we're talking about so many great things. I was hoping we could discuss now the Nazi UFO connection, that book that was recently put out. I've heard a ton of stuff about this, and I'm not sure what to think is accurate and disinformation. What kind of knowledge and info was put together in this book that was recently put out?
Okay, well, now, the Germans were big on secret societies, going back as far as, like 1918. They would get together, the Vril Society and other secret societies, Theosophical societies, and other groups which were popular in Europe at that time. And they would meet together with their members, usually behind closed doors. These were not open to the public. These meetings. There was one group that met at a hunting lodge in Germany on a regular basis, and the group consisted of several, as I understand it, very attractive mediums, and several gentlemen, and they would hold channeling sessions, and apparently they were able to channel a group of human-like beings from some other solar system who gave them plans, diagrams, blueprints, whatever you want to call them, for various disc-shaped objects that strikingly resemble UFOs. Now, doing my research on this, I was often wondered why it seemed to be, on one hand, during the early days of the UFO phenomena, that the government was trying to, of course, cover up the fact that UFOs existed. And it's true they would rather have you believe that they didn't exist, but if you had to believe, then therefore you should believe that they were extraterrestrial. No other point of origin was acceptable. All the literature printed on the subject in the late 1940s and the early 1940s were about spaceships from Mars. Pilots were seeing these things. Major Donald T. Keyhoe, I guess he was the original voice of ufology. He headed up a group known as NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And for years, he tried to get Congress to investigate and have discussion on the subject and open hearings, very successfully. And he had a good credentials. He had been in, I believe, in the Marines, and he was the personal assistant of Charles Lindbergh. And somehow, I guess he started collecting these reports from pilots. He started this. Well, he didn't actually start NICAP, but he got a hold of the group, and the organization was very top-heavy with military and former CIA types on the board of directors, most of whom had very positive statements to say about UFOs being of extraterrestrial origin. So you had this somewhat serious approach to ufology, and then you had the contactee element, which was very popular in the late 40s and early 1950s. You had contactees like George Adamski and Truman Bethune and George Van Tassel and Daniel Fry, who claimed that they had met blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Aryan-type extraterrestrials. That's the best way that I can describe them. In fact, in some of these cases, which was kind of kept from the public, but you can go back and you can Google some of this and you'll find it in some of the early reference books. A lot of the saucer pilots that these people met spoke with a German accent. There's one case in particular, Reinhold Schmidt. Now, Reinhold Schmidt was a grain buyer who traveled throughout Nebraska. And he was one night out on the road, traveling late. And he had an experience where he saw a ship land, and he went on board. And they were human-looking pilots. I mean, most of the beings that were being encountered at that time by the contactees just looked like you and I. They were like if you've ever seen the paintings and the drawings of this spaceman Orthon. that Adamski supposedly met. He had long flowing hair and Aryan type, basically Aryan Nordic. They call them the Nordics today.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, some of them did speak with a German, heavy German accent, which Reinhold Schmidt actually could understand because that was his parents, were German uh, background. Also, too, in the case of George Adamski, who was the most vocal and the most popular of the contactees, and he took some rather sensational photographs, whether they're legitimate or not. Uh, Back in I guess it was 52 or 53, he had his first experience where he actually supposedly met this being from the planet Venus in the desert in California, and uh, one of the fellows who actually set up this meeting. Most people don't realize that it was actually set up through the Ouija board. There was a fellow by the name of George Hunt Williamson, who was an amateur anthropologist, and he had traveled among the North American Indian tribes, collecting stories of the sky people and UFO sightings from the native Americans. And anyway, he had used to speak with supposedly with these UFO beings through light wave communications and through the Ouija board, which was always kind of suspicious. I mean, how do you know that the information that you're getting through a Ouija board is legitimate or not? But except in this one case, they being the spirits of the space people on the board, gave a definite time and place to go and meet them, and this is where Adamski supposedly had his first contact. Well, they happened to have with them some a plaster of Paris, and they took some imprints of this fellow Orthon. He was wearing some sort of space boots, right? And they took imprints of the boot marks that were left in the soft soil. And you can go and you can see these in the internet, or you can buy the book, the Nazi UFO Time Travelers. And when you look at the boot, lo and behold, what's impressed on the bottom of the boot but the swastika? Now, why would somebody from the planet Venus have? I mean, I know the roots of the origin, going back to India, it being a power source. I mean, before the Nazis got a hold of it. But why would an Aryan-looking space person from the planet Venus have a swastika on the bottom of his boot? And if you go back and you look at it on the internet, you'll see it. I mean, it's as plain as day. So I began to realize that there had to be a German connection or a Nazi connection to this. And I thought also too these UFO crashes, and I started to investigate some of these, like Roswell and all. There was not any real evidence that they were of extraterrestrial origin. First of all, they almost all happened in the Southwest or in the state of New Mexico. Well, this is the same area of the country where after World War II, the U.S. government bought over 5,000 Nazi engineers and scientists under Project Paperclip, and they put them to work. And they were the developer of our early space program, Werner von Braun and Professor Hermann Oberth. And they also pushed the interplanetary theory. Now, I believe that the UFOs, at least some of them, and there are many different explanations, that the Germans got a hold of some blueprints or plans that were given to them through telepathic or channeling means, and they developed this information and made a series of craft. And that was what was being flown around the skies in New Mexico and Arizona and were being seen to crash. And the cover-up was that, again, if you had to believe anything, believe that they were piloted by little, green men from Mars, and stay away from the more conventional theories. But the theory does actually encompass. It's the only theory that actually encompasses the original concept that this information did come from somewhere else, but it was developed here on Earth by these German scientists. And it's also one good reason for the cover-up too. Why would the government go to this extent to cover up, especially in those days, the fact that we might have had a UFO crash? Well, if it were something that was developed by the Germans or the Nazis, they would want to cover that up, because it would certainly be a national disgrace that we were actually utilizing the so-called talents of these German Nazi scientists and all that were brought over here under Project Paperclip. So they would rather like make up stories about extraterrestrials and all, instead of telling the truth because of some embarrassment to the country. Basically, I mean, yeah, they felt, I think, that it was their patriotic duty to do so. So if you ask me about these UFO crashes, and I know it's not a very popular concept. I think they have the ear markings of something that is more terrestrial than extraterrestrial. That's not to say that there aren't spaceships coming here. There's a little bit of everything that's wormed its way into our atmosphere. And some of them may be good, and some of them may be evil, and some of them have positive, benevolent feelings towards us, and some of them may be more of what we would call demonic, in which case you can go out and look for our book, Round Trip to Hell in a Flying Saucer.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at your website right now and also your YouTube channel, Mr.
Yes.
UFO's Secret Files, and you talk about in one of your podcasts, Mothman. I think that's pretty cool. What do you think Mothman is?
Well, if Mothman exists, it has to be some sort of interdimensional. Well, now, people that saw Mothman, some of them described it as a mechanical being, right? Other people saw it as a creature with glowing red eyes and a wingspan of 25 feet or something to that extent. So again, these things do have the ability to morph. I mean, there have been stories. I've talked to people who had UFO experiences, and I think there's one incident in particular. I spent many days investigating this case. A fellow by the name of Carl Higdon. He was worked in an oil field in Wyoming, and he took the day off to go hunting, elk hunting. So he drove his pickup truck out to a grassy area and parked it there. And I guess it was pretty early in the day, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, right? And he got out of the truck. He had his rifle with him, and he saw some elk off into the distance. And so he picked one elk out and decided to, unfortunately, bring it down. And he raised his rifle up and shot it. And all of a sudden, he said he could feel there was this change in the atmosphere around him. Everything became silent. There was no sound of birds rustling in the trees, whatever the sounds of that area would be. And the bullet came out in slow motion. And it appeared to actually hit some sort of force field in front of them. It never struck the elk. And later on, the sheriff did find the bent casing and the bullet from the rifle. Anyway, off in the distance, he saw this cube. That's the best way he could describe it. It was a cube, and there were several beings standing in front of the cube. And he wasn't a very good artist, but again, on the internet, you'll find a drawing. It was rather human-looking, but it had a bizarre facial features and a hair like a punk rock musician or something. This was long before punk rock was around. Anyway, within a few minutes, he found himself actually inside the craft. Now, the peculiar thing about it was when he saw the object from the outside, it was about maybe 20 feet in diameter and very, very small. When he got inside the craft, he was teleported there. The elk that he was hunting, several of them were actually cordoned off inside cages inside the object. So he realized that whatever the object was had to be much bigger inside than it was from the observed from the outside. And again, this is this morphing effect where people see UFOs and they change shape and form and size right in front of their eyes, and it can't be explained. Anyway, so Higdon he went for a trip somewhere else. When he got to his destination, he went up into a tower that he was said was much like the world what is it, the Space Needle in Washington D.C., and he could see out the big glass windows there, and there were people on the street moving along motorized walkways like escalators or what you see in the airport today, where people could put their luggage and not have to walk the vast distance to the next gate. And he saw that some of the people were human-looking, like they were earthly origin, and some of them were these weird punk rock looking aliens. And they put them on some sort of machine, and they did a physical scan of his body. And when he got back to where the truck was, they actually pointed some device at the truck. It disappeared from the grassy knoll and ended back in a marshy area where the sheriff's department had to bring in two tow trucks to get the darn truck out of this marshy area. They had to put down logs and put chains to the truck. I think there's an episode of what was Leonard Nimoy's program, In Search of, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, In Search of. If you type in Carl Higdon or Wyoming oil man or hunter or something, there's actually, that may be the only known interview with him, and it explains in detail what happened. In fact, maybe I'll go back and watch that later on, because it is one of the best cases that I've ever investigated. And then when he came back and he was taken to the hospital because he was a little bit incoherent and they couldn't explain what the truck was doing, having moved where he could never have driven the vehicle. Apparently, he went to the hospital and they took X-rays of him, and they found out that he had previously had I think a scar in his lung, the tissue or something, and it was completely gone. Whatever whatever was wrong with his system had been corrected when he visited this other place and time or something. A very very bizarre story, and I think our original report is in one of the books, and I can't remember which. Well, UFO Saga, which is like contains some of my. I used to do a column for Ray Palmer's magazine long before your time, which was called Flying Saucers from Other Worlds. Ray Palmer had been one of the original publishers of Fate magazine. Then he started his own line of magazines, and I did a regular column for him for maybe about 5 or 6 years. And a Saga magazine too. Anyway, the book Tim Beckley's UFO Saga, you'll find the whole story, and it's a real cheap book, and it's well worth the few dollars to find out the Carl Higdon story.
Great. And I was hoping we could get into also your information on alien mind control. I think that's a fascinating subject, and then I look at a lot of the Wi-Fi stuff, the possibility of nanotechnology and other things. What's going on with that right now? What's your latest info?
Well, we just talked a few minutes ago about this fellow here on CNN who just made some comment about UFOs. I think that these beings have the ability to take us over at times. I mean, in this book, it's the Alien Mind Control Project Alien Mind Control. It's the first in a series of UFO Review specials. UFO Review being the magazine that we originally published back in the newspaper that we originally published back in the 70s, and now we're going to bring out some material by current writers and some of the old material that have passed most people by. But we found that there were a lot of cases where people were actually being possessed by, we call them UFO beings. We can't really say if they're extraterrestrial or what they are, but some of them tell some very, very bizarre stories. Some of them undergo physical change. Some of them undergo mental anguish, and a few of them actually. I mean, there have been some stories where people have been so twisted they actually tried to stab someone or kill somebody, and when they were caught and examined, claimed that they were put up to it by some voice in their head. So again, is this the government, some secret government that's playing tricks on us, or is this UFO oriented? I have a feeling that these objects give off some sort of a pulsation or magnetic rays that affect us if we get too close to them. And so people start having these bizarre experiences. They find out that their homes are being invaded at night by creatures or beings from somewhere else. They're followed along a highway, and they'll find somebody who's suddenly sitting in the back seat of their car. Some cases, their automobile actually the steering wheels have been taken over, and they started to drive recklessly. So there is some negligent or negative force out there that is behind some of this phenomena. Not all of it, but enough of it certainly to be troubling.
Oh, absolutely. And another thing that I'd like to ask you about is the Men in Black phenomenon. I've heard before that they could almost be like a holographic encodement of some type. What info do you have on them?
Well, I'm one of the few people probably the only person who has taken a photograph of what we believe to be an authentic man in black. And this is on UFO Hunters, and in fact, I wrote it up in this Project Alien Mind Control book. There's quite a bit about the men in black in there. Back in the mid 1960s, like 66, 67, there was a big UFO flap on the East Coast, and of course, I guess the sightings that got most of the attention were in and around Ann Arbor, Michigan, and this is where the Dr. Hynek, said that some of them could be swamp gas. He kind of got forced into saying this by his bosses in the government, and there was a big wave of sightings going on. And at that time, I was working for Jim Mosley out of an office in Manhattan. And he had an associate of his, Jack Robinson, who was an investigator for the magazine and was a frequent guest on like the Long John Nebel show, Long John being the pioneer individual as far as all-night broadcasting. I mean, before Art Bell and George Norrie and all. He had a regular program, and he had on all these strange people like Adamski and so forth who had these experiences. And Jack would come on the air and would talk about his favorite subject would be the inner earth and the Shaver mystery and the hollow earth and so forth. And he was an investigator in the area. He lived in Jersey City, which is just on the outskirts. It's a suburb of Manhattan. You can take the PATH train over and be there in 10 or 15 minutes. Anyway, Jack worked in a bank here in New York. And he would leave for work around, 8 o'clock in the morning. And his wife, Mary, would go out and do, the shopping and the errands. Now, they had investigated a case where a group of teenage boys had seen an object land in a park in New Jersey, and apparently several creatures had gotten out of the object and stood like digging up soil, or they were doing something there, and they were observed by these 4 teenagers, and they reported their sighting to Jack Robinson, who wanted to write it up for Saucer News. So they had Jack and a few of the other investigators had the boys meet them just outside the perimeter of the park, so they could point out the area where they had the observation, the sighting of the aliens. Now, there was a small group of people, I guess the 4 teenage boys and Jack Robinson and maybe a couple of other investigators, and they were all huddled in the sidewalk outside the park. And as Jack and his associates took notes, they noticed down the block was a black Cadillac with frosted over black windows. Now, the window was pulled down just enough so anyone who was inside could have looked out, but you couldn't see them inside. And they just had the spooky feeling that they were being watched. And there was no other traffic in the area. I mean, most people just don't park, outside the perimeter of a park and keep tabs on a group like this. Okay, so I guess they had their discussion there for about maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And Jack, I guess, had his tape recorder with him and went home and took the notes and wrote them up for Saucer News. Now, Jack said that, actually, Mary would call us. When Jack would go to work, take the train over to Manhattan, Mary would call and say that there was a strange individual standing in the doorway of their apartment building. Now, it was not a modern skyscraper or anything. It was an older, like tenement housing would be the best way that I could describe it. Maybe 5 or 6 floors, no elevator. It was an older building in Jersey City. But Mary said that this individual seemed to be monitoring the activities of people coming in and out of her building. I think Jack's brother came to visit every once in a while, and some family members, and other people would bring over sighting reports and so forth. Well, on one occasion when Jack got home, he found out that even though the door was locked, someone apparently had gotten into the apartment because all his files had been laid out on the floor. Stuff dumped out of out of the bureaus and things like that, but nothing was taken. I don't know. There might have been a couple $100 in the house and some jewelry or something, but nobody bothered any of that. They just seemed interested in the UFO reports, in particular on the files of this one incident that involved the 4 teenagers. Also, Jack said that he was getting weird phone calls, or he had the feeling that somebody was listening in on their conversation. Okay, so Jack's wife Mary called us Jim and I, while we were working at Saucer News over in Manhattan. And we didn't know whether she was perhaps prone to a little bit of a hysteria. She was a medium. She fooled around with the Ouija board. Sometimes she saw, people on the fire escape and stuff like that. So we didn't know whether she was kind of exaggerating or telling the truth. So we wanted to find out on our own. So we decided one morning, without letting anybody know that we were going over there, we got in the Jim's car, and about 8:30 in the morning, we drove over to Jersey City. We pulled onto the block where the apartment house was that Jack and Mary lived. Sure enough, standing there in the doorway was this rather rigid figure. Black hat on, black suit, very strange looking shoes if you look at the photograph that I took. So there was also a lot of traffic on the street. Very, very, people were double parked. I guess they were making deliveries, in the morning or picking up kids to go to school. And so we decided, well, we're going to go around the corner and then try to find someplace to park, or maybe even double park, and go talk to this statuesque individual standing in the doorway to see exactly why he was there. Well, now, it probably took us maybe 10 or 15 minutes to get around the block because of the very narrow streets and the one-way streets and the double parking and all of this. When we got back to the building, the individual was gone, and the black Cadillac that was parked at the curb was also gone, and another car parked in its place. Well, okay, but the strange thing about that was, in addition to the individual being there, is the fact that he never returned, and they never had any more problem with their files being, gone through, or for the telephone being tapped. So I always think, at least in my bizarre head, that somehow I managed to get rid of the MI. Instead of scaring me, I scared him off because he never returned to the scene of the crime. Now, I've written a couple of books on the Men in Black. Of course, the main book that was kind of started it all was the book called "They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers." And if you haven't read it, you should go out and get a copy. You can find it on eBay, probably on Amazon. I'm sure there's still various editions of it. It was written by Gray Barker. In fact, there's an episode on my YouTube channel that's about Gray Barker and his life. He was an early UFO publisher. He had Saucerian Press, and he wrote a book called "They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers," which was about the encounters or the confrontation that a gentleman who just died actually a couple of months ago by the name of Albert K. Bender. He died, he was like 95 years old or something. Albert K. Bender claimed that these three individuals visited him in his home in Connecticut and warned him that there would be very negative consequences if he dared tell the secret of the flying saucers, which apparently he had come across. He had an organization called the International UFO Bureau with about maybe 1,000 or 1,200 members, and was putting out a newsletter that went all over the world. And he gave up his publishing efforts and closed down his organization because he was exceedingly frightened by the visits of these three men in black. And the book by Gray Barker, "They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers," details that particular episode, which is the forerunner of the movies with Will Smith and all, which has nothing to do with the real MIB cases, of course. But if it wasn't for Gray Barker and my friend the late John Keel, there'd be no Will Smith and the Men in Black and all these other comic book versions and things that have come up on the subject, which have little bearing on the actual material, involving people who claim that they've been threatened or coerced into remaining silent about what they've discovered.
Sure, absolutely. And could you tell us about that experience Bill Shatner shared with you?
Oh, well, now this turns out to be a trumped-up story, apparently. Back when I was a stringer for the National Enquirer, I was doing we used to have the phone numbers of all people don't realize this, but of course celebrities want publicity, publicity, and in those days the tabloids were very popular, and they were nothing like they are today, and they had a lot of different celebrities. I mean, you didn't have to be Paris Hilton or Britney Spears to be in the. They took actors, and there's some rags to riches stories and how I got started in the show business. And one of the questions I always asked these celebrities was, "Did you ever have a UFO sighting or a paranormal experience?" And I got enough to fill a couple of books. I mean, that are in print. Well, Bill Shatner told me this story, which he later denied and said he had made it up because basically he wanted publicity. He was out in a desert driving his motorcycle, and he was following a pack of, like, I guess, six other cyclists, right, on their Harleys. And for some reason, I guess his chopper started to spit and sputter, and whether it ran out of gas or there was some mechanical failure or what, I don't know. But he claims at this point that some other strange person dressed exactly like he was joined the pack of the five other cyclists. So if they look back, they would think that he was still behind him, when in fact he was stuck in the 100-degree heat, with the bike almost laying on top of him by that point. Anyway, he says that he passed out in the noonday sun, but when he came to, there was an object directly over his head, and it kind of pulled the bike and him to safety. They found the road, and there was a gas station there, and he got the bike to start again. Okay, now this was in the Inquirer. I wrote it up in my book, and so forth and so on. But then years later, he said, "Oh, he just made it up because he wanted attention and wanted to see how far he could get in making the reporter, which would have been me, believe such a far-fetched story." Well, again, we didn't have to give him a lie detector test. This was an entertainment piece, I mean, if he said that it happened, it happened. I mean, it wasn't something that we're going to go beyond that point, and we reported it, and it got some attention. Anyway, he was nice enough, though, to invite me on his show. He had a program, I guess it lasted for 3 seasons, although once in a while it pops up on the science fiction channel, called William Shatners Weird Or What? And I am on the 3rd season, the 3rd episode, and there is this story, rather far-fetched as well, about a alien which got trapped in a trap. I mean, a big trap, animal trap, whatever you would call that, right? In Mexico, and it was skinned alive because it was dropped in Nevada acid or something like that. And they wanted me to come out. This was a Jaime Maussan story, so you can imagine the reliability of it. These little figures do show up from time to time, and they wanted me to come on his program, Shatner's program, and say that this was an extraterrestrial. And I said, I'm not going to do that. It would embarrass me among my peers, to some extent anyway, right? And not only that, it's not very likely that an extraterrestrial pilot who arrived here would be foolish enough to get skinned alive and caught in an animal trap. Just does not seem reasonable to me. So I said, okay, I'll come to Canada, because that's where he lives and did the show. And I will say that if the creature is legitimate and it's authentic, it is probably a jinn. If you've studied any of these, a jinn supposedly an evil, demonic creature or spirit that lives inside, the lamp. Well, it doesn't really, the Aladdin's lamp, but that's the story. And of course, it's a part of the Islamic faith. It's kind of like they're demons or negative spirits. So that's what I did. I went on the show and said, well, this, if this thing is real, it has to be a jinn. It's not from outer space. And of course, the whole thing actually is a hoax, and because that's what it is. But it was an interesting story, and sometimes you get these things, Stephen Greer, who of course a lot of people respect, he's got his own little alien that's floating around. It's 9 inches long or something like that. It's not an alien. Come on. I mean, everybody I know, they found the aliens in a cave in Puerto Rico. They're all over Mexico. They're not aliens. I mean, most of them are actually composites of creatures that some people put together. There's actually even a place that you could go to. I don't know if it still exists anymore, but Micah Hanks and I once did some research on the internet about this. And there are roadside attractions, or they used to be all over the country, where you could come in and see the body of a live dinosaur, or Bigfoot in the window, or mermaids were big, or aliens, and somebody was actually selling these. They put together pieces of different bones of different sea monkeys and things like that, and people would put them out to get them to come into their their tourist trap to buy some turquoise or something along that line. Stick a sign in the window. Home of the original mermaid or something like that. So
Right.
you see. I don't know if you see. I haven't been out in the that part of the country for a long time, but I know they used to be all along, especially in Arizona and New Mexico.
I've seen a lot of the
Come and see the
pictures.
alien.
I've seen a lot of the pictures on the internet, and as far as what you're referring to, where they take
Yes.
different parts of different
Oh
animals
yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff and
yeah.
make it look really
Absolutely.
good.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, there is a website that the guy does a newsletter. It's called Roadside Attractions, and I don't pay it that much mind, but he puts one out maybe like every other month, and it's got all these places that you can. One guy has got a. I've written this up in my book on the Mojave Desert Mysteries. He has a white Bigfoot in his backyard. I mean, he doesn't claim that it's real or anything, but there were sightings of this albino Bigfoot around, I guess, Edwards Air Force Base. In fact, I was on the History, not the History Channel, the Travel Channel, and there's an episode that I'm on there for almost the whole half an hour on Joshua Tree, California, and does that. So
Interesting. And also let me ask you this: as far as Mount Shasta, there's a lot of stuff going on out there. Even you've got SETI Ranch, James Gilliland, real nice guy. I've talked to him
yes.
before. What's going on out there?
Well, I haven't been out there, but of course I've seen the same reports that you have about these objects that fly over at different times of the night, and it almost appears as if there's some sort of aerial warfare going on. And there are other Joshua Warren now. He used to work with a fellow. I can't think. Ed Games, maybe his name was. Passed away recently down in. Let's see. Joshua's from Asheville, North Carolina. So he'd be down in that neck of the woods, and they had the same thing. They'd go out with the night vision, goggles, and they'd look up into the sky, and these things would be just passing by as if on a regular, regular timetable. Maybe they are. I don't know. They could be. Some of them could be satellites and just space debris. And of course, we got a couple of mysterious. There's the Black Knight that's supposed to be wandering around up there. There's plenty to watch, I guess, at the at the nighttime sky.
Oh yeah, we certainly live in amazing times. And
What part of the country are you in?
right now, I'm in San Antonio, Texas.
San Antonio, Texas. Well, I've never been out there, but are you near the Marfu Lights?
I went out there a few weeks ago, actually a couple months ago,
Yes.
and
Uh-huh.
I didn't see anything at the observatory, but I went way deep south to where I was
Yes.
close to the border, and I saw something that blew me away. I literally saw the Marfa Lights. I was out in a peak out there, mountainous peak, where there was no cars, no nothing, in the middle of nowhere, and it went across the street. It looked like, I thought somebody was like running across the street with a flashlight.
Yes.
And then at first I thought it was a bird, and then this light went and followed it. And then I saw some lights to the left of that started bouncing back and forth. So I thought I'm like, okay, are these guys coming over from Mexico and crossing the border? I got a little bit nervous, right? I thought it was some people. And so I jump in the Pathfinder. I grab my producer, Kristen. We jump in. We take off towards that area, and it just disappeared. And the interesting thing about this is that specific area, there's only one way in. And we were almost to the end, and it was only us in that area, and it was definitely the Marfa Lights. It was really cool.
Well, these spook lights or ghost lights have appeared all over the world. There is on demand, TV on demand, whatever they call that, the Time Warner, but I'm sure that everybody else has it. There's an episode that was just played of. I'm lost for words here. The channel that has all the ghostly phenomena and stuff on it, America's Destiny or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a whole episode that's devoted to the different ghost lights. They have the Marfo lights on there and the Brown Mountain lights, and I've been down there. And the best one is in Norway. And I don't know if they've seen it recently, but they actually set up an observatory where they have all kinds of video footage of these objects, and you could hear people clapping and screaming and applauding and gasping and all. And these things are just coming out of the sky, and they're moving around, and they're not headlights, and they're not trains. And I mean, I've seen some of these ghost lights. You say, that's a car on the highway, Jack. Give me a break. I came 2,000 miles down here. There was a railroad track that I went to one time, and it was supposed to be the headless conductor with the his lantern out there, and it was the way that the train track bent, and it was a light. Maybe there was some weird phenomenon that was seen there every once in a while, but what I saw was car lights reflecting on the rails. But these like the Brown Mountain lights and the Marfu lights and the one in Scandinavia, they're not that close to the ground, so you got to rule out train lights and car lights and things along that line. But there's another one on the border of Oklahoma and Missouri. That's one of the original one. It's called Spooksville, and it's got a little museum and all out there, and you can go and see the lights, which I guess were more in places like that. They were more predominant in years past because there is too much traffic. I was just starting to say, I remember the first time I went out to visit some of the contactees and things, and we went out to past Palm Springs into Desert Hot Springs and some of these places, and you would look up into the sky, and it was like looking up into the universe. Absolutely fabulous, unbelievable nighttime view. Now, there's shopping malls that have gone up. There's more street lights. People keep their, porch lights on all night long. You really got to get out of there, out of the city, in order to see a spectacular sight like that.
You're right, and I don't know, can you see this screen that I'm sharing with you right now?
Oh yeah, yes.
Okay, so this is real quick before we close out tonight, because I know you need to go, and I really appreciate you coming on the show with this elite project.
Wonderful, good conversation, yeah.
It's been great. Now, here's the Marfa lights up here, or not the Marfa lights, but the Marfa town, and you can see the observatory. I went there, didn't see anything there. So Kristen and I drive down, we take the main highway here, and there's a street that goes off of Highway 89 here that takes you down all the way here to Chinati Peak, and there's only one way in. Okay, here's the road right here. You can see it, 2816, pulls up. There's only one way here. So we make it to about right here, and we stop right here. We pull out the chair, the lawn chair, essentially. We kick back, we're relaxing, and we're looking, and we got a great view this way. We can see the Marfa lights because we're almost up here at the peak. So not the Marfa lights, but the observatory area. We can see out towards that direction.
And how far is that from where you had the lawn chair?
Well, okay, so let me. That's a long way away, but the lights that we actually saw. Here's the coolest part. So we're close to the peak right here. When we're looking up, we can see the lights are flashing, or the stars are flashing. It was just incredible. I've never seen anything like it. That's how crystal clear the sky was. So I see this like blue. It looked like a shooting star at first, but it wasn't because it actually dropped. It like went straight down, and this was out towards the Marfa Observatory. I saw it just go whoop, and then a few minutes later, okay, on the actual dirt road. The dirt road, this is out looking just at nothing, essentially, maybe 10 feet up, not even 10 feet up, about 7-8 feet up off the ground, and this would be maybe 100 feet, 150 feet in front of where we're sitting looking, and it's just pitch black. I see this almost like it looked like a bird that just goes straight across the road, and then a second after that, you see this light, it looked like a white light, just go, boop, followed it, and then a second later, to the left of the road again, you see these two lights going back and forth like they're dancing, so that's why I thought it could be maybe somebody with a flashlight, and if you can see here how close we are to the border, right? You see how close we are to the border of Mexico. I'm thinking, okay,
I can even see Donald Trump standing there.
So I'm like, okay, let's get in the SUV and let's see what this is. So I grab Kristen, we get in the SUV and we drive down towards the lights, and they're gone. There's nothing there.
Huh.
It was spooky. It was really cool.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So that was our experience out there in that area, and I'm going to go out there again.
Are you going to go back?
Oh yeah, I'm going to spend the night out there, and it's just going to be. I'm really excited, 100%. So. Really appreciate you coming on here with us. This has been great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation, just like being in your living room.
It's been great.
Yeah, you bet.
Now, just so we know how to get in contact with you, throw out your website and your YouTube channel for us, please.
All right. Here's the best way. I can hook you up with all of this. All right? 2 places. Look for Tim Beckley on Facebook. Friend me. I still got a few hundred people that I can hook up with, right? Send me an email. Mr. UFO, MRUFO8 at hotmail.com. I'll send you links, everything that you want to know. I'll send you catalogs in the mail. I'll send you a DVD. I'll send you my next mortgage payment, in fact. But, that's the best way. Facebook or MRUFO8 at Hotmail. And, of course, there's the Mr. UFO's Secret Files on YouTube. This thing will keep you busy for the next, literally, 10 years by now. I think we got over 100 videos, and we take the show, the weekly show on KCOR, which is Exploring the Bizarre, and our buddy Peter adds visuals to it, and it's like watching TV almost, So there you go. Anyway, I enjoyed
Fantastic.
being on the show and leak out some more information.
Will do, and hopefully have the
Yeah,
opportunity to speak with you again sometime.
absolutely. Anytime. You bet.
All
Have a
right.
good evening.
You have a good evening. Take care. Right on. You got a great website,
Oh,
conspiracyjournal.com.
yes, indeed. Yeah.
Now, how long has that been up? Because, I mean, there's just a plethora of intel on here.
Well, that's Tim Schwartz, who is my co-host on Exploring the Bizarre and author of quite a few of our books. We have about 250 books, I think.
Oh, wow.
And he does the website because I have to admit that when it comes to technology, it took me years even to get Skype running. I mean, I would fight and kick, and then when I did it, it took me 5 minutes.
Right.
As opposed to a lot of other things that will screw up your computer, and I still have I do a show every week, and I try to get the guest on Skype because the quality is so much better when it works. Now it does screw up. That's why I always like to have a couple of guests on and a co-host because you never know when it's going to go south on you.
Right.
But when it does work, the quality is certainly better than a landline. Coast to coast won't let the guest use Skype.
What does Coast to Coast use?
Telephone.
Wow.
Yeah,
Huh, I had no idea.
Yeah, a land-to-land line. They won't let you use a cell phone, but they want you to use a land-to-land. But yet they'll take calls on Skype, which doesn't make any difference. Maybe they don't want you to sound better than George Norrie.
That's probably it. Yeah. Clear Channel's evil plan.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
That's
no.
funny, man.
Yeah,
And I'm on your YouTube channel right now, Mr. UFO's Secret Files. You got a great
Yeah.
channel also. And you put together a new book. It's on Amazon now, finally. And Nazi UFO time travelers. Love to hear about that because I've heard the connections before, the Thule Society, Roddenberry, all that stuff. Is
Well,
there any connections
even though I'm semi-retired, we still do about 3 books a month.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah. In fact, we just came out with. No, I don't write these all myself, but I put my name up on Amazon because that way, if I'm on a show, I can tell people just to type in my name.
Sure.
But we did UFO Prophecy, which is a book that I had published. Oh, I don't know, in the mid 1970s by Arthur Shuttlewood from Warminster, England, and so this is the 50th anniversary of the town that was haunted by flying saucers. So I got his granddaughter to do a new introduction and collected some new photographs from the town and reprinted all the the material from the original book, which sold very well when it first came out. I mean, the books don't sell anything like they used to in the old days. It's
Because of the internet.
Yeah, that has a lot to do with it. I mean,
Just
we
mindset.
give everybody all this stuff for free, right?
Sure.
I mean, they're
It's easy
sitting
to-
here and listening to our show and reading the material on there, and I don't know, who knows? People's habits change.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely. Our attention spans have definitely shortened throughout
Yes.
the years.
Absolutely, that is one of the main things. Well, we always did believe in a lot of visuals because my background is mainly publishing magazines. I was the editor or publisher of about 30 different titles, some of which never lasted more than one issue. But UFO Universe went for 11 years.
Oh, okay. And, I'd like to really get to know your background first. I don't know if all of our listeners here at Leak Project know really how you've been in a paranormal life your whole life. It's been around you. And so could we get to know you personally a little bit and how you started off as far as, didn't you grow up in a haunted house also?
Yeah, I had quite a number of poltergeist. I guess I don't know if you would call them poltergeist phenomena. I guess low-level poltergeist phenomena. Doors opening and closing and lights going on and off. And I remember one time we were at the kitchen table, and this big chinaware plate, slid off the table and went onto the floor. That would have been about 3.5 feet or something, and it didn't break or anything. I mean, I can't say it floated there, and I don't even remember, But I guess my big introduction to all of this was when I had my first of 3 UFO sightings. That would have been in 1957. which was a peak UFO a year. The big one, of course, was the first flap was 1947. Then you had a lot of sightings in 1952, which was the sightings around the Capitol building and things along that line. I mean, pilots were reporting stuff, and police officers were chasing unknown aircraft, and humanoid creatures were just seen popping up, where they had never been seen before, mainly in Mexico and South American countries. But little by little, the reports of encounters with, well, I call them ultra-terrestrials. I don't call them extraterrestrials because I have no proof that they come from, outer space. We really don't know where they can come from. I mean, everybody has a theory, and certainly, mine has changed a number of times over the years. I give it all more of a paranormal ring these days. But anyway, getting back to 1957, I was 10 years old at the time, and it was the middle of a heat wave in the summer, like July or August. And in those days, nobody had air conditioning, so you'd sit out on the front stoop, until it cooled off, and then you went indoors. And it must have been just after, right around twilight, someone had come running up to the stoop where we were sitting. I think it was my mother and a couple of kids from the neighborhood, and pointed to the sky. Okay, now there were two objects up there, or two lights, I should say. One was across the street, directly over to an abandoned factory. It was a Lefkowitz Leather or something like that. And the other one was pretty much over the house where I lived with my parents. Not directly, but overhead pretty much. And these things continued to circle overhead for a period of about maybe, I would say 10 or 15 minutes. Now, I can't tell you I saw any landing gear. No Martians waved at me that time. No portholes, nothing of that sort. But they did seem to be under intelligent control. In fact, the next day in the newspaper, there was a little item to the effect that other people had witnessed this phenomena, but the authorities were saying that it was nothing more unconventional than a weather balloon. Well, even at the age of 10, I knew that this was not a weather balloon. First of all, it was brightly lit. Weather balloons, especially after sunset, are not brightly lit. They do not have any illumination of their own. Now, normally, anyway, this is long before, kites with candles inside and all that stuff. And now it's a lot easier, I think, to misinterpret a UFO than it was in those days because we had less stuff flying around. There was no drones. Nobody had balloons in the neighborhood. And so this was something unexplained. And I wanted to find out more. So I went and I bought a couple of paperback books. The books are by Frank Edwards, Charles Fort. Edward Ruppelt did the report on unidentified flying objects. He worked for the government for Project Blue Book. And I became engrossed by the subject. And I started writing into the local newspaper, asking people to report to me anything that they might have seen that they couldn't explain in the sky. And I started to get phone calls, and I started to get letters. And I started putting out a newsletter when I was about 15 years old. I had saved up. Now listen to this one. In those days, if you were like going to school, you could put 50 cents a week into a bank account. Students, can you believe that?
Yeah, yeah.
Today they'd call the cops and have you arrested or something.
Right.
Like that, But anyway, I amassed a fortune over a couple of years of a big $400. And I went out and I bought a mimeograph machine. It was, everybody else had bought the Sears and Roebuck version for $99. Mine was about $400. It was a Gestetner. And you typed the stencils and you put the ink on the roller, and it was a mess, to be honest with you. In fact, my mother banned me from using it in the house. It looked like something out of a crime scene. The kitchen, it had ink stains and fingerprints all over the wall of the refrigerator. You just couldn't get the stuff out. Anyway, I started out. It was called the Interplanetary News Service Report, and the first issue we printed was 75 copies and 10 pages. Now, in those days, you had no way to collate the stuff. I put out a big ironing board and put the piles of paper and go from one sheet to the other, then staple it at the end. And by the time I gave up the ghost and merged with Jim Mosley Saucer News, we were up to 1,500 subscribers. We had as many subscribers as APRO had members, and but it was a lot of work, and it was 40 pages, and had to print it and collate it all. So Jim Mosley, who had Saucer News, he took over the publishing of it, combined it with his semi-professional publication, and hired me as managing editor. And so I started traveling from New Jersey to New York every day. He had an office there. I got paid a salary, and I don't know. I got into the publishing business, publishing, packaging other magazines for other publishers. They needed somebody to do it real cheap. I mean, where most magazines would have a budget of many thousands of dollars, we'd get $2,500, and we had to put the whole thing together for that amount, and whatever we had left was our profit. So I did magazines like Front Page Disasters, which was very interesting, and I always stuck in some sort of paranormal or like planes disappear in the Bermuda Triangle. Had nothing to do with hurricanes or earthquakes and stuff like that. But I always snuck in an offbeat article and stuff. So that's how I just got in. That I continued to put out my own little magazines and things too. I had for many years the UFO Review, which was the only flying saucer newspaper published every month in America, and it had quite a bit of a circulation. We printed something like 32,000 copies, and it was on newsstands. You could grab up a copy and for $1. And people used to complain that our publications were overpriced at $1. Can you imagine that? I pay for some of the glossy magazines that come in from England now like $11.95.
Yeah, that's
big
common
big
now.
difference. Yeah, big difference. Yeah, and in fact, we did just come out with a UFO review special. It's on alien mind control, and it's available on Amazon and on Kindle, and you can buy it directly from us if you want. And